places we could start, but where do you want to start as far as your keys to why the U.S. was so dominant in this performance over Mexico?
Listen, we could talk tactics, and Greg Berhalter has a lot in this. We got to give him his flowers. He's dominant over Mexico, and we will talk about Greg Berhalter. But can we just start with talent? I think that's the biggest issue here is the talent level in one program and the lack of talent in the other program. And the Mexican national team post-game was talking about that lack of talent. The U.S. men's national team in the game took advantage of that lack of talent. You look at these two programs, and the starting 11 for the U.S. men's national team, 7 of those players played in England, 6 of them in the Premier League, 1 in the Championship. There's 1 in the Eredivisie. There's 1 in Serie A. You know, big teams like Milan. There's players in good moments. And you look at the opponent, and it's sparse. Probably their most informed players doing the best in Europe at the moment. Offensive player, I should say. Santi Jimenez can't even get on the field. And when you look at the two programs and where they're heading, one has over 100 players scattered, littered around, you know, Europe, whatever types of leagues they want. The other, they're screaming to be let go. They're screaming to be sold cheaply so they can start their European adventures. And there's just a stark difference in quality and the quantity of that quality abroad. And I think this is just the most evident thing here. I can't recall a time where the difference in talent between the two was so one-sided in favor of the U.S.
Yeah. Perk, when I saw that this was your answer, I looked at the 211s, and you know this is something we always do at ESPN. We always do it on ESPN FC, the combined 11. And I'm looking through the Mexico 11 versus the U.S. 11. There's not one Mexican player that you say, oh, yeah, he gets in a combined 11. There's maybe 2 guys who you can look at and you have to make a case for them. You can maybe make a case for Edson, not based on last night against Tyler Adams, but I think you could make a case. And then you could make a case for Santiago Jimenez, but the problem with that is he can't get even into Mexico's 11. He might be the best 9 in both pools, but he's not getting into Mexico's 11. So you have nobody truly in this Mexican team, Herc, that would guaranteed, without a doubt, make a combined 11. When else in the history of this rivalry have we ever been able to say that? And the other thing that's very clear is that both sides know about this talent difference that you're talking about. We heard Greg Berhalter there, right? They're talking about legacy and three-peat before this game. Mexico's talking about where are their guys playing and where aren't we playing, right? That's the excuse attitude that Mexico had coming into this game. You look at what Greg Berhalter and those guys were talking about. They're talking about winning, and you see it, Herc. You see it in how these teams play. I think Mexico has their worst performances against the United States, and I think the U.S. saves their best performances against Mexico, and that's considering in this case, Herc, the U.S. had played an extra 30 minutes in the semifinal that the Mexican team, they didn't have that. So, you know, of all the things that Mexico could have potentially found a little bit of an advantage of in this game, right down to the form coming in off the Jamaica game, even those things didn't play out. And that, for me, is why I'm going a little bit different with my choice. I'm going with the lineup that Greg Berhalter chose, and specifically some of the big decisions that he made as kind of why the U.S. was able to dominate so easily here. Now, the first thing that's obvious, man, is the amount of changes. To make 5 changes in your lineup to the team that you put out in the semifinals, to make 5 changes to a lineup before a final, that's a lot. But it was very much needed based on what we saw against Jamaica. And if you think of the changes that were made, and some of them were obvious, right? You're obviously going to put in Serginho Dest if you've got him available. But they all had an impact. Tim Ream, I would say unexpectedly solid in defense. Serginho Dest, I mean, we saw it in the highlight. There was probably 4 more clips that didn't make it. That's how good he was. Tyler Adams, Herc, massive risk. A guy you know you can only play for 45 minutes. You start him, so you create an issue for yourself at halftime, and he rewards you with a just unbelievable golazo in the 44th minute. Haji Wright maybe didn't have his best game, but it's clearly the right call to play him after he scores 2. And the biggest decision of all, which is, again, pretty obvious, is Gio Reyna in that starting lineup. He's the difference maker. He gets the goal that clinches. And I think the other thing that's important about Reyna here is he was better for me in the second half than the first. And I don't know if that's down to Gio figuring something out or if that was something that they changed in the locker room at the half, because he was in much more dangerous spots in the second half than in the first.
I think that's it. He was in more dangerous spots. He was operating very, very deep in the first half. And maybe that's by design. Maybe coming and picking that off the center back is by design for Gio Reyna and trying to pick and choose where to operate and maybe launch some of those services. That's what they were going for. But this goal by Tyler Adams, which was a massive, massive gamble, really opened things up for the U.S. men's national team. Listen, it's not crazy to start Tyler Adams. I don't think anybody in their right mind is going to say, why would you start one of the most important players you have? I understand starting Tyler Adams. I think it's wild you start him and you go into it only saying he's only going to play 45 minutes. That's a massive gamble. But this gamble paid off for Greg Berhalter. You said Tyler Adams repaid that trust? Absolutely. And from reports, he was angry at halftime and they got in an argument because he had to come off. But that's where he is today in his minutes count. And the agreement that Greg Berhalter, which I hate these agreements that the U.S. men's national team does with with other club teams. We've seen it before with Dortmund. We've seen it before with Chelsea, et cetera, where they come to terms on the amount of time their players can play. National team, that's your ground. You make the decision. But it worked for him.